I was a Scoutmaster for 10 years. I'm not sure if that's something people care about anymore, but it's true. That was a big chapter of my life. It might be dorky or unflattering for me to admit, but I had a lot of fond memories from those times. The bond you develop with your peers, your pupils, and the world around you. Nothing can replace that. Retirement suits me, don't get me wrong, but sometimes I do miss it. Kids, at least until a certain age, always smiled their brightest when they were in the Scouts. Working with them made them feel respected, capable, and brave. Those are the feelings we all want, aren't they? Those feelings are the reasons why I never told any of my Scouts this story. I didn't want them to know that our little organization, just like any other, was absolutely fragile when compared to the strength of nature itself. There's an island in the Northeast where we'd take graduating Scouts for one final hike before sending them off on their life journeys. Prior to those big hikes, Scoutmasters like myself would be asked to visit the island. We'd check for dangers, clean up any debris left behind by adventurous partygoers, and generally prepare the island for visitors. That was my assignment on the week I met it. Aside from snakes, raccoons, and the occasional fox, the island we visited was never dense with predators. That was the belief, of course, right up until my encounter. I was packing up for the night. I was lighting the oil lamps, heating a kettle in the kitchen, and changing out of the beige uniform that had defined my recent years. Then I heard something like thunder. I knew where it came from. The shore. That was where my boat was docked. I rushed outside to see what the noise could have been. I expected to see an accident of some kind. I thought there'd be another boat, splintered up against the ridge that marked the western edge of the beach. Instead, I found my own boat in pieces. Drag lines led from the place where I'd tied the vessel to the place where the boat was torn apart. Shards of wood poked out of the sand and created a path from the beach to the brush. Massive indentations followed the debris like footprints the size of tree trunks. I was in awe. I couldn't believe it. There was no storm overhead that could have wrecked my boat. There were no other people here, no saboteurs lurking in the woods. If they had arrived, I'd see their own vessel floating in the water. I followed the tracks with my flashlight, finding a hobbled sense of comfort in the memory of the radio that sat in pristine condition back at the cabin. Even if I didn't have a way off of the island myself, I could easily call for help. The tracks got harder to follow as they began to weave through the trees. Whatever I was chasing, it appears that the owner of those footprints had turned sideways in order to navigate the forestry. It looked as though it was strafing, walking shoulder first. Was it so big that it couldn't fit in the woods naturally? If that was the case, why couldn't I see it yet? Why couldn't I hear it? Thankfully, my other senses came to the rescue. I smelled it before anything else. Deep and wet and heavy, it smelled like the edge of the waterline. It smelled sour, salty. It burned my nose like I was breathing in the water itself. I almost choked. I only stayed quiet because my eyes jumped to the source of the odor. My gaze leapt ahead of me, and that's when I saw it. Two massive eyes the size of oranges, staring at me. The beam of my flashlight shined in its wet irises. Its head was twice the size of my own. Its mouth stretched wide, similar to a toad or a catfish, but its skin and its body looked human. Its flesh was a tender pink, scabbed and scarred by the wilderness. It looked human, except for its massive size. Its massive frame forced it to lean forward. The creature's knuckles sunk into the dirt. As I watched it, it stepped closer. Its gait was slow and cautious. I saw that its feet were short, stunted like a hoof. And when it opened its mouth, it bellowed. It droned. Its cries shuddered out from its chest. My legs and my bones shook immediately. All I could do was turn and run. I don't remember when, but at some point I dropped my flashlight. I ran in the dark. I knew where to go. I knew where the cabin was. I knew where the radio was. But the beast wasn't gone. I heard its footfalls like hammer blows behind me, slamming into the earth like every branch was a nail that needed stomped flat. The monster was chasing me. I was thankful for its massive stature. It was too big to run at its full speed, I'm sure. I don't know how it got to that island, but I'm sure in hindsight that it wasn't the monster's home. I heard its shoulders thudding into the trees. I heard the birds scatter and shriek overhead. Thud, thud, thud. With every slam, I thought the next deafening impact would be the sound of its giant hands slapping against my back. I imagined its fists raining down on me. But then, suddenly, I was home. I was in the cabin. I was locking the door and looking through the window, relieved that there was no sign of a creature. I reached for the radio, pleaded for help, and got out of there as soon as I could. No one believed what I saw, but they did cancel that hike. Our organization never returned to the island, and I promised never to tell this story. It's frightening, isn't it? It's frightening to know that there might be things lurking out there that none of us expect to find. But the older I get, the more I've reconsidered. Maybe this story can be useful. What do you think? If we know it's out there, can we prepare for it? Or should we stop going out there at all? I want to share with you an experience that happened to me and my dog, Sparkles, one night while we were out for a walk. I am not a young woman, though my mind is still sharp and have lived in this town for most of my life. I have walked the same route with Sparkles for years, and it has always been peaceful and uneventful. However, one night, something happened that changed my perception of the world around me. I had never been a believer in the paranormal. I thought those kinds of things only happened in movies and books. But what I saw that night made me a believer. It was a warm summer night, and Sparkles and I were out for our usual walk. We lived in a quiet suburban area, and our neighborhood was always peaceful at night. However, as we walked, I started to feel uneasy. Sparkles, who is normally very relaxed on our walks, was growling and barking at something I couldn't see. I couldn't see anything in the darkness, but Sparkles was acting as if something was there. I have always been an animal lover and have owned dogs my whole life. I am retired now and spend most of my time with Sparkles. We have a close bond and I cherish our time together. I've never experienced anything like what happened that night, and it has left me very uneasy. As we continued walking, I saw something moving in the distance. At first, I thought it was a stray dog, but as we got closer, I realized it was something far more sinister. It was a massive, black dog-like creature with burning red eyes and thick, matted fur. It was larger than any dog I had ever seen, and my mother used to breed Great Danes. It was staring right at us. I stopped in my tracks, and Sparkles barked louder and louder. We both stood there as the creature approached us, and I had never been so scared. It was so close that I could feel its breath on my face. I could see its teeth, and they were long, yellow, and sharp. The beast started to circle us, and it had a deep, bellowing growl. I held on to Sparkles' leash, trying to keep her as close to me as possible. It seemed to be toying with us, waiting for the right moment to strike. It was a truly terrifying experience, and I thought it might be the end for me and Sparkles. Suddenly, I heard a group of people calling out to me. They were a couple of teenagers who were out for a walk. They had seen the awful creature and were trying to help us. They yelled and ran at the creature and threw rocks in its direction. Thankfully, this worked, and the creature ran away. I was shaking and couldn't believe what had just happened. Those nice kids helped me back to my house and sat me until I calmed down. I was afraid to go outside after that, and I couldn't sleep for days. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened and the fact that Sparkles and I had come so close to being attacked. The strange creature could have easily killed us. I felt lucky that we had escaped with our lives. I started to research what I had seen and came across something called a hellhound. I learned that they were supernatural beings that were often associated with death and the devil. It was a chilling discovery. I wanted to know more about the hellhound and why it had come after us. I did a lot of research on hellhounds and paranormal creatures in general. I learned that hellhounds were often seen as harbingers of death, and that their appearance could be a warning of imminent danger. The experts I spoke to were intrigued by my encounter and asked me to describe the hellhound in detail. They seemed to think that it was a unique encounter, and they asked me to keep them updated if I had any more sightings. I also learned that hellhounds were said to have a connection to the supernatural and that they were often seen as guardians of the underworld. I couldn't believe that I had come face to face with such a creature. As I delved deeper into my research, I found out that there had been other sightings of hellhounds in the area. Some people claimed to have seen them lurking around graveyards and cemeteries. I was amazed to learn that I wasn't alone in my encounter and that other people had seen these creatures too. I am so grateful that I had Sparkles with me that night. She may have saved our lives by alerting me to the hellhound's presence. I am also grateful for my new young friends who helped us and for the experts who helped me understand what had happened. The encounter has left me with a deep sense of awe and wonder at the mysteries of the universe. I have continued my research into the paranormal and have even started journaling about my experiences. I have found a new passion for the unknown and the supernatural. As strange as it may sound, I am grateful for what happened that night, as it has opened up a whole new world for me. I now know there are things out there that we cannot explain that go beyond our understanding. I am convinced that Sparkles may have been growling at the hellhound all along and that she had sensed its presence long before I did. I feel lucky to have seen something so rare and unusual, and I am much more open-minded now. Thank you for allowing me to share my story. I hope it will inspire others to be more aware of the world around them and always be on the lookout for the unexpected. Life is full of surprises, and we never know what we might encounter. It is up to us to be prepared and to stay curious. Thank you again for time, Donovan. If not for the hellhound, I would have never had gotten into listening to your stories. I have a story even I don't believe in. Do you get that? Do you have one of those stories where maybe you lived it but it still doesn't sound real? I guess that makes it seem like I'm about to talk about something terrible. Either terrible or miraculous, right? Why else would the story be so inconceivable? I'm not sure any of that is true. I don't think I encountered anything that was purely good or purely evil. But I did have an encounter. Maybe you can tell me what to make of it. I was fishing in the early spring. Fishing's about the only thing I have to pass the time anymore. It's been that way ever since my stint with the army came to an end. It's enough for me, though. A pole, a stiff drink, a book, and maybe my dog as company. It doesn't get much better than that. Lucky for everyone, I didn't bring my dog the day this happened. I was, however, distracted from my fishing line with my eyes glued to the pages of a wartime biography. When the splashing hit my ears, my eyes jumped from the ink on the page to the ripples in the water. I thought my hook had snagged something. The water wasn't particularly deep here, so a thrashing fish could kick up quite the storm. Instead, I saw a stone sinking to the bottom of the running water. Then another one hit just beside it. I yelled and hopped to my feet. Whoever was on the opposite side of the stream was ruining my chances at catching anything worthwhile. I thought it would be a kid, or maybe someone who held their liquor a little less efficiently than me. What I saw instead was a beast. I saw it lifting a third stone, larger than my head, with both hands wrapped around its curved sides. The rock dangled between its legs like the creature was caught mid-deadlift. It dropped the stone and straightened its back. Only then did I realize that it was close to 7 foot tall. Only then did it dawn on me that the beast I was staring at was standing upright. It wasn't supposed to do that, right? Bears didn't do that, not for prolonged periods of time and certainly not so naturally. Did apes do that? My brain was busy trying to rationalize the things my eyes were taking in. Tall, as thick as the trees around it, covered in rippling muscle that was obscured only by short reddish hair. Its face was almost human. Maybe that's why it was so difficult to quantify. My brain was trying to recognize the beast as kin, but it wasn't. It wasn't the same as me or as any person on this planet. It was different, stronger. I knew that by the size of the stones it was tossing. Taller, certainly. Meaner. I didn't know for a few more seconds. Suddenly, it came barreling across the stream. The water barely reached its shins. I turned to run, taking only a small knife with me. I heard the beast get tangled in the fishing line that had drifted across the flowing water. I heard it roar like something from Jurassic Park. Then my fishing rod appeared just a few feet to my left, lancing the ground like a javelin. It easily could have been my back it sunk into. Had the beast missed? Was it just threatening me? I didn't plan to find out, so I kept running. I heard its feet leave the water but continue slamming across the dry ground. It was chasing me all right, with no intention of slowing down or forgiving me for my apparent trespassing. I hoped I could outrun it. I hoped it would be too big to nimbly cut through the trees. When I started to feel its breath on my neck, I knew that I was wrong. I only had one way out, or so I thought. I turned on my heel, letting my back crash into the base of a tree, and I pointed my knife out toward it. I was going to fight the creature for my right to leave. It was too late for that. Its hands were tougher than coiled vines. When it swatted my wrist, I felt the bones crumple. The knife fell from my hand and the creature roared at me, this time so loudly that I felt its voice booming into my skull. I felt my brain rattle. For a moment, the world was so loud that I was sure death was coming. I thought I'd be deaf, then blind, then gone completely. I expected those mighty hands to strike my head next, maybe my chest. I closed my eyes, grit my teeth, and waited for the end. When the roaring stopped, I didn't dare open them. I didn't open them even as I heard the creature slowly walking away. I thought it was a trick. I was still convinced that it was too late. I don't know how long it took, but when I opened my eyes, the sun had gone down and the beast had disappeared. I was alone all of a sudden. My wrist was swollen. I left my knife in the dirt and got out of there as quickly as I could. I lied at the hospital, describing some accident that led to my injury. They didn't believe me, but it was easier to swallow than the truth. They sent me home with a bottle of painkillers, a fresh cast, and a head full of questions. You must understand, I don't believe in what I saw. I don't believe that it could have struck me in such a real way that my bones would break. Yet here I am. I have the X-rays to prove that this happened. Why then is it so hard for me to come to terms with? What's it called when your reality is too bizarre to believe in anymore? That's the reality I'm living in. I hope you never have to wake up